Hi, my name's Jeremy. This is Red Beans Recording, and this is a walkthrough of the Ableton session that I brought the Reggie song OP1 mix into, and I'll probably see a video for it pop up right here. If you haven't seen it, go ahead and check it out. I 99% of the time do bring everything I do in the OP1 on those videos into Ableton, chop it up, do a ton of processing, and all that good stuff because that's how I roll, and I like to do processing on things and do more effects and chop things up more. I'm sorry if you thought I did everything in the OP1. I do not. I do a ton of work in Ableton as well. That said, everything that you hear in the performance part of the OP1 videos where I'm putting everything together, that's straight out of the OP1. And then everything during the visualizer at the end, that's all what you are seeing in front of you here. So real quick to go into it, the OP1 has 4 tape tracks, and you'll see the remnants of them chopped up here. Track 3, track 2, track 1, they're all over the place, track 4. And the first thing I do is I bring those 4 tracks into Ableton and I chop them up into the individual instruments that I recorded on those channels. So track 4 is 99% of the time drums, track 3 is bass, and then tracks 1 and 2 are for anything else I want to do. Try to avoid overdubbing on the OP1 so that I don't overdub parts on top of each other, and I have them isolated when I bring it into Ableton, and I chop them up into the individual channels so that each can get their own processing. So real quick, we will go through this and I'll show you what I did. The intro and outro drums each got their own channel. I took some high end out of here. I thought there was something harsh, so really simple there. The percussion, really not much going on here. It's just that crazy telephone affected arpeggiated percussion thing. Kind of bouncy, kind of cool. The main loop got its own channel and it got a bit more processing. So let's go through that real quick. So a pretty simple loop. What I found out after bringing it in here and wanting to recreate the OP1's master channel drive effect was that when I drove the whole mix up to where I thought it should be based on how it was recorded, because the OP1's drive master effect does not apply to the tape channels. It only applies to something that you commit to the album and the OP1. I was like, dang, I need to do some work here. So first things first, let's turn this chain on before. So a bunch of stuff going on here. First, saturation. Saturation's great. Increase the volume, starts giving a little bit of saturation. If you don't know what a saturator is, I'm sorry, I can't explain it right now. Added some bass, got rid of what turned out to be a really gross sound around, 3K. I'm really sensitive to frequencies in 3K. I end up taking a lot of them out of things. I don't know if that's the way my ears are, if I'm actually kind of broken, but 3K is actually a terrible frequency if there's too much stuff going on there. 3, 5, 7 can really hurt your ears. So a lot of things get de-harshed by pulling down some stuff around there. So after I did that, I mixed the track, I'd exported it, bumped it over to my MacBook to upload it to SoundCloud, and I'm listening to it on the MacBook speakers, and I'm like, what is that freaking hiss? And it turned out that this loop was really hissy. So I'm like, okay, well, it's part of the loop, it's part of the charm, but I can't have that noise floor going through. It actually kind of disappears once things start getting a little busier down the line, but during the sections where it's basically just drums and bass, I'm like, it's too much noise. I like a little bit of grit, but not that much. So what I did was I reached for a transient shaper, and a transient shaper allows you to, if you can visualize like the hit of a drum on a wave. Like that. Hey, look at that. Thanks, Neutron. So that's a transient. If I want to reshape this sound, I want the main transient to the drum to remain because it's the main drum line, but I do not want that hiss. So the hiss is in the sustain. How can I get rid of that? And the answer is a transient shaper. The way that Neutron's transient shaper works is it's multi-band. So I can actually zero in on each individual band and shape the transients accordingly. And you've seen I've done a little bit of different processing for each low, mid, and high frequency band. So I guess just take a listen to each one of those real quick. So that's without, and what I'm taking down the sustain quite a bit with what Neutron's calling a smooth curve here. If I turn this off, you're going to hear that rumble go away. but we still have the kick. Very nice. All right, let's check out the mids. So that's with the transient shaper on. And here's with it off. Oh, so now we're starting to hear that hiss. And now it's gone. So anyways, that's what's going on there. It was a journey. All right, so last thing here is the glue compressor, which is stock with Ableton. The hits, again, the transients in this drum line were really nice in the OP1 because that master channel drive just magically does things to things that I do not understand and I have yet to be able to reproduce in software at all. I wanted to tame the transients but still have a lot of punch. So this is the glue compressor. It kind of does exactly that. So here's without it. And here it comes in. The little jazz drum kit thing got its own channel. And I wanted to emphasize the old schooly sound of the drum kit. So gave it a room reverb, again, more saturation to kind of dirty it up, and a decent amount of compression to squeeze it. Now, the important thing to notice here is the reverb is before both of these. It would sound a lot different if I put the reverb after both the saturation and compressor. It would be a lot cleaner. But one of the things I really like to do is putting compressors and saturators in overdrive after the reverb channel. So besides the gain difference, I do end up bringing in looped percussion a lot after I record in the OP1, and this was no different. This is a shaker sound, I believe is a stock Ableton clip. I wanted to just give a little bit of rhythmic interest as I went through different sections. So a nice little stereo shaker. One thing I guess is worth talking about here is that I did apply a swing preset to it. It wasn't quite swinging how I wanted it to. And in Ableton, if you go to your little clip settings here and you hit this button, this little groove button, boop, 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 you'll open your what you call a groove pool. And if you haven't explored this, I suggest you do so. Not only is there simple things like quantizing, but there's all these other types of things that when applied to the sound will actually force the clip, whether it's MIDI or audio, to kind of take on a different feel in terms of timing, which is why there's a whole folder for MPC swing as opposed to just a regular swing. The MPC had a very, very specific type of swing to it. Swing is like if you're playing 16th notes and you can play them very straight. Here it took on that kind of loping feel. It's pushing and pulling the notes a little off what would be considered a rigid 16th note grid. There's also that the mid section had this breakdown. All right, so in terms of the drums here, I really like this section. I really wanted to emphasize it because it's one of the like special moments in the song in which everything that's been going really crazy kind of comes down again. So first off, took down some highs. That, I don't know if you can hear it, but that finger cymbal was really loud. It really hurt my ears up here in about 10K. So I got rid of that saturation again. And yeah, so that's pretty much what came out of the OP1. Then I was like, I really like this section. I love this drum beat. What else can I do with it? And the answer was add some trash. And once I did this to one thing, I'm like, oh shit, I got to add trash to everything. This is a plugin by a company called Isotope. I bought their music production suite a few months ago, and it's great. They have a couple really useful tools. Trash is one of them. Trash is a distortion plugin. I haven't even really begun to dig into it. I'm preset surfing still in it right now, but it's got some really, really cool stuff. So preset surfing through the trash thing can really get you some interesting effects on stuff, and surprises is always good. So what I ended up doing was I'm like, okay, I'm going to apply this to the drum thing and get that. But once you have an interesting channel with something cool like trash, something that's CPU intensive like trash, you're like, okay, well, how else can I use it? And it turns out that it sounds a lot different on other things than it does on drums. So you can hear that vowel filter working. but not so much as you can over here. So I used this particular trash channel to accent certain parts of the song as they went through. Fun stuff. So this was a much more fuzz-based trash channel. Oh God, I love that so much. So much. All right, so took down a shit ton of highs. I just wanted this to be a mid-crunchy kind of thing. Ran it through trash, took out all those lows to really just keep it kind of lifted in the frequency spectrum. Controlled some peaks with a limiter, and then finally stereoized it by running it through the Ableton Live simple delay, turning off sync so that it's millisecond based, dropping left channel all the way down to 1, so it's basically not delayed at all, and then increasing the right channel's millisecond delay to, to taste, and you end up stereoizing the channel. This channel, like, what else can I put through this? Just like filth everywhere. I love distortion so much. All right, not much to say with this drip. This was a post addition. I just kind of wanted to accent this change here between the build up and this breakdown section. So it's literally just a little drip sample. I believe it's from the Ableton standard library. Let's get into the bass. I added the compressor to help level the differences in volume as we go through. I kind of like to squash stuff. I'm probably guilty of squashing stuff too much. That's my sin. I'm sorry. But then I was like, again, the OP1's master channel drive is some kind of fucking voodoo, and I always want things to sound like it once I get them into Ableton. One of the ways that I do that is by just amping things up and running them through things that do various forms of compression or reamping or just drive saturation. So this is a Waves plugin. It's one of their quote-unquote artist series plugins that basically are supposed to be dropped onto the instrument channel that they're called and do magic to them. You're not supposed to think too much about what's going on here, though this one actually is much better than like the CLA ones. And sometimes they do good stuff. So without it, it's like, it didn't sound like that in the recording. It sounded a lot better. So I'm like, let me fix this. So you can obviously hear there's a shit ton of sub coming in. There's a bit more presence. It's just bigger and fuller. And that's exactly what I find these artist series plugins, and I say that with a healthy dose of skepticism, do to things, is they just kind of make them sound bigger. So that may be something you're into. I don't know. The only other interesting thing about this particular bass channel is that as I was getting into the end, I really wanted to emphasize some of these downbeats without a beat. Something I really like to do is take the beat away from a downbeat of a series of measures. It kind of like pushes you into the next beat really hard. So there's now a downbeat on the 1 there. All the drums and all the big things kind of come in on the 2. So to emphasize that, I got a bunch of stuff going on. But since we're talking about the bass channel, this is something that I think I talked about in the Lugent video. I do this a ton with the OP1 stuff, and it's one of the reasons I like bringing it into Ableton is pitch processing. I will go into my clip, and I will hit this little E button to open my envelopes. I'll make sure I'm on clip, and I will hit the transpose modulation, and this gives me an envelope that I can play with. So you can repitch audio, and sometimes it sounds really cool, and sometimes it sounds really terrible. Moving on to more trash. I wanted to really beef up the bass coming out of the last buildup. So all I did was I took the same channel and I doubled it, gave it its own channel, added this trash plugin. So delicious fuzz stereo. It just helps support the sub and the low key bass sound that we had here. And then I'm like, it's not funky enough. I need to make it funkier. So we have an auto filter and it's in low pass mode using one of the newer filter models that Ableton has. No drive, don't need it, but we are using an envelope follower here. And what that does is every time one of these notes hits, this filter will open up. Unfortunately, I wish I kind of showed it. It does not. But basically, this cutoff frequency here. So that's pretty much without the filter. There's a bunch of resonance going on right now, but moved it down to here. You kind of hear that wah effect going on. That's what this is doing. Every single time something hits in here, it's creating an envelope that pushes this filter up. But that's how that wah effect is being handled. It's one of the things that auto filter does. It's really cool. If you haven't messed with the envelope on the auto filter, give it a try. Delicious. Auto filter crush. This was another channel, same idea as the bass trash, but I wanted a different tone. I wanted support for the main bass channel up here, but I wanted it to sound different than that big old trashed bass that we made. So again, another auto filter, all the lows taken out, bit crushed, but also an LFO is doing most of the movement with this thing. A little bit of softy sample to give it some fuzz on the top end, because the point of this channel and the one up here was to help support the bass, help bring it up into the top end, make it more apparent to the listener. I don't need more bass frequencies. And then finally, we have the auto filter. LFO is moving the filter around here. And again, Ableton, please just have the filter move around. I can make these tutorials so much more interesting. But can envision a sine wave moving this filter through the spectrum a little bit based on a rate and the mount. And that filter's in bandpass mode, which is why it sounds like it's a telephone. So I took a couple phrases of, I think like 3 or 4 phrases that were sent to me by an awesome person named Sion. He sent me some Reggie samples and I brought them into the OP1 and I brought them in as a drum kit. And I chopped them up even more within the OP1 drum kit and assigned different pitches to them. So I created this sort of melodic Reggie instrument out of these things. There's a fair amount of chopping here. I did a lot of quantization within the clip. All of these little blue marks here are transient markers that I set and then moved things around, forced it to swing a certain amount, you know, just to kind of like undo my shitty performance. All right, so what's going on with Reggie for processing? First of all, we got the Neutron plugin by iZotope. Neutron is something they came out with semi-recently. It is a plugin that's supposed to help make mixing channels of instruments easier. Using this thing called Track Assistant, you can press this while your content's playing. It will analyze it, and it will attempt to do things to it to make it sound better using one of, or multiples of these 5 plugins. Equalizer, 2 compressors, multi-band compressors actually, an exciter, and a transient shaper, which we looked at earlier. I will be honest, I was really enamored with this thing when I first got it, but I have found it to be really, really hit and miss. Sometimes it completely misinterprets what you throw into it, and just like, you're like, why did I even waste time with that? In this case, it did provide me with a somewhat useful EQ curve. Anyways, it's added some compressor and some exciter. Who the fuck cares? Nectar is iZotope's vocal plugin. Kind of things that you might reach for when you're working with vocals. Gates, a harmonizer, saturation, which is nice, compressors necessary, de-esser, which is absolutely necessary, and then some effects that I've never used, and reverb and delay, and finally a limiter, which is always great. So I literally just threw a freaking preset on here, and it's the hip hop and rap modern and hard preset. I'm an audio engineer, and that's what I do. I just put presets on things. Anyways, I adjusted it to taste a bit. Here's what it sounds like with and without it. I'll tell you a secret. Sometimes knowing just what preset to reach for is not a bad way to get by in life. Multiple channels of Reggie. I had him hard panned in the OP1, 25 left, 25 right. I found that was too much once I got him into Ableton, and now he's sitting comfortably around 4 left, 4 right. Not much else to say here. I did do some pitch processing here and there to accentuate certain sections like this. You can see there's a pitch envelope. Terrific. Phase Me Out is the little voltage synth, the OP1 synth voltage with the CWO effect on it. Felt it was hitting a little hard in the lows for what it was supposed to be doing, so I got rid of those. Saturator, like everything got, and an auto filter to help bring it in. And again here. Oh yeah, so I did do some pitch processing here too. I did this with Lugent, the last OP1 video I did, where smooth octave shifts, almost like you're pitch bending with a pitch bend wheel. Just to add a little bit more interest. I really like that effect. I'll probably use it a ton. You can use it to get like record stop effects and stuff like that out of your content, which is nice. This trashed verb, if you put it on a filter before distortion, then you can bring out certain harmonics, and if you put it afterward, you can bring out other harmonics. So we're keeping this low. We don't need all that high end. It was just supposed to sit in the back with the reverb. That's what's going on there. In this section, I felt like even though we were coming down from a big section, I didn't want it to just completely go away, and I heard these chords that I had made, and I thought of Deadmau5, and I'm like, what would Deadmau5 do? And he has like some growly organs sometimes in his pieces that sound like they're overdriven, and he does cool chords things with them, and he usually filter modulates them. I didn't do any filter modulation on these particular ones. I just wanted them to growl in the background. So just to be clear, that is the same as this. Textures. I love textures. All right, the brass channel. These were those brass stabs I did. In the OP1, the preset was, I believe, like a Mellotron preset. It was a sampler patch that I got off of the Operator One forums, operator1.com, which is a fantastic, fantastic resource and full of many great people. This, I had a very specific sound I wanted to go for, and you'll see that there's a ton of processing here. I knew that I wanted it to sound like big 80s synth brass. So, all right, so you can already hear that there's a bit of delay on the brass. That's what I added in the OP1. I already knew what kind of sound I wanted to go for. A very, very quick, almost spring reverb kind of thing going on. So we used a compressor to kind of squash the whole thing. We added saturation like we've done to almost everything else in here. We took down some of the highs because in the mix it ended up being too bright. We used that stereoizing effect using a simple delay plugin where we offset the channels by a few milliseconds. We added some chorus to stereoize it even more because a lot of those classic synths sounded great through chorus. A convolution reverb, which is set to a spring to even accent that springiness even more. And then finally, I was like, it's still missing something. It doesn't have quite the decay that I want it to. So we're using a really fast instance of this dub delay with some dampening to add a little bit more tail. That's what you hear ringing out after I hit the stop button. So I just wanted something really, really funky and cool, and I felt like this was kind of the major hook of the song in a way. So, and finally, after I was about an hour into mixing, I'm like, I'm listening to it, but it's like hitting too hard on the beat or something. It's not quite right. I'm like, oh, you know what? I should add some pitch modulation. So that's what I did. hear that tiny little lift, right as the note hits? It's really, really subtle. It's only about three semitones, and it's already almost through its path by the time the note hits. It's just like it's kind of like what you would do as a brass player in a way. That kind of like that blat sound. So that's what's going on there, just to give it a little bit more interest. This is an OP1 channel cowplink. This is the weird little keyboard sound with the CWO modulated by an LFO on it. All right, let me turn that grain delay off so you can actually hear it raw. Hear that weird kind of like skittery sound? That's all done in the OP1 with an LFO modulating the delay amount of the CWO effect. Now, I wanted to make that even more apparent, so I squashed it to bring out that decay. I compressed it to bring out the decay. I killed some frequencies I didn't like, and then I added the grain delay. And a grain delay, you can actually modulate the pitch of each grain or each delay hit afterwards, and some other things, frequency and spray. Spray will loosen each individual hit's attention to the timing of the grid or anything like that. It will kind of like literally spray each grain afterwards. So I just wanted a little bit of pitch modulation, so I turned this up to an octave. Hey, let's hear it without real quick. All right, let's turn the grain delay on. You hear that extra bit going on there? Kind of like skittery in the high end. That's what the grain delay is doing. So just accentuating what the CWO with an LFO was already doing. No. Moving on to the Decepticon sound, Decept. This was that stupendously filthy, transformer-y, phased synth sound that came in about halfway through the track. And I double-tracked some stuff on top of it too that I left in there. Again, if you have an OP1, you have this preset. It's in the DNA synth under Decept. I recommend checking it out. It's one of the coolest presets in the new OS. I double-tracked it on channels 1 and 2 in the OP1, so that's why we have stereo, and kept the original panning, 25 left and 25 right there, and then just carved some stuff out of it. It was really harsh in the high end, and I did not need the low end because I had the bass where I wanted it to be. Fantastic. I'm a sucker for Mellotron stuff. The flute sound and the cello sound and the choir sound from a Mellotron, which was an old tape-based synthesizer thing. Basically used tape loops to play sounds. Very, very classic, instantly recognizable, and I love them so much. This channel is this one just pitched up in Ableton an octave because I wanted more of it. The D-synth are those crazy noise sweeps that I recorded in the OP1 double tracked. I took out all the highs and used an overdrive plugin on it. I wanted to push it down in the sonic spectrum to give room for what else was going on in this section. It could have gone either way, honestly. Like, I probably didn't need to take out that much high end, but I did anyways. Okay, so one of the other things I like to do in Ableton that I don't really like to do in the OP1 is a ton of risers and elevators and crashes and sweeps. They're a lot easier for me to do in Ableton and tweak and move around, so that's what all of these are. And these are all samples that I've pulled from my sample library. A lot of stuff from Loop Masters and, you know, Vengeance, all the usual suspects. Bread and butter shit that's good to have around. Oh yeah, the master channel has some of this guy, and I'm sure many of you are probably groaning right now, especially since I already mentioned Vengeance and Loop Masters, and I'm such a basic bitch because here's a fucking sausage fattener, who the fuck cares? Again, this was here to help beef up the sound to get it closer to the OP1's drive master channel effect, and I just used a tiny bit of it. I don't even know if I actually like turned it up at all. I just plopped it on the channel and then turned the color way up. That's it. Using Ozone for mastering, I'm not going to get into that because it's a whole other can of worms and it will kill my CPU. So that's Reggie's song. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments, and I will see you in another video. Cheers.